Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be learning the Cessna 172 NG Digital by Airfoil Labs. This tutorial is going to be chaptered, allowing you to click through to learn any segment that you want. For the sake of detail, we're going to be working from a real-world Cessna 172S manual from 2007. Alright, so we're going to start off with the pre-flight inspection. The first thing is the pitot tube cover. We need to come over to there. It's on the left wing, and we need to remove the cover and make sure it's not blocked by anything. Next, we want to make sure the aircraft manuals are accessible to us, placed in that left pocket. Make sure the parking brake is set, and remove the control wheel lock. We need to confirm the Magneto switch is off. Avionics switch bus 1 and 2 are off. Master switch Alt and BAT can come on. These can work as single switches, or you can turn them on both at the same time. I want to check the primary flight display is on. You might need to turn on the brightness depending on how you left the aircraft last. We're going to check the fuel quantity for the left and right. We want to make sure the low fuel left and low fuel right are not shown on the PFD. Now the oil pressure and low vacuum annunciators you do want to show on the display. Next we're going to turn on avionics bus 1, and we're going to do a forward avionics fan check, and you can actually hear the fan audibly if you listen closely. If you do hear it, let's go ahead and turn off the number 1, and we're going to turn on bus 2, and we're going to do the aft avionics fan check. And we can hear it, so we can go ahead and turn bus 2 off. Next, we're going to turn on the pitot heat switch. Just make sure you took off the cover, and the pitot should be warm to the touch within about 30 seconds. If that's working properly, let's go ahead and turn off the pitot heat switch. And the low volt annunciator should be shown. Next, we can turn the master Alt and BAT off. We need to make sure the elevator trim control is in the takeoff position. The fuel selector valve is set to both. The alt static air valve is off, which is pushed fully in. And we need to check our fire extinguisher. You're going to verify the gauge pointer is in the green arc. That's not really modeled here, but that's what we would be checking for. Now we need to go outside. We're going to make sure this baggage compartment door is locked with the key. The rudder gust lock, if you're using one, is removed. The tail tie down is disconnected. And then we want to check the control surfaces. We want freedom of movement and security. And same with the elevator trim tab. And we want to check the antennas. Make sure they're good, nothing's broken. All in good condition. We're going to move over to the right wing, trailing edge. We're going to check the flaps. We're going to check the ailerons. And we can disconnect the right wing tie down. And then check the main wheel tire. At this time, actually, I want to change from these bush tires to some proper tires. We'll be checking for inflation, tread, wear, stuff like that on these tires. So after this, we need to check the fuel for any impurities. So we're going to go to each of the drain valves and drain at least a cupful of fuel using the sample cup from each of the sump locations to check for water, sediment, and just the proper fuel grade before each flight and after each refueling. Now, if water is observed in your fuel, you're going to take some further samples until it's clear, so you can gently rock the wings and lower the tail to the ground to move any additional contaminants to the sampling points. And you're going to take repeated samples from all the fuel drain spots until all the contamination has been removed. And if contaminants are still found after that, the aircraft should not be flown. Next, we're going to do a fuel quantity check visually and make sure it's at the right level that we want. And then we'll secure the fuel filler cap. Make sure the tank vent on this side isn't blocked by anything. Next, we're coming over to the nose. We need to use the fuel strainer quick drain valve. It's located at the bottom of the fuselage, and we need to drain that. Again, checking for any sediment. Now we need to check the engine oil dipstick and check that oil level. Now you do not want to fly below 5 quarts, so if you're below that, you want to add some up to about 8. Continuing the pre-flight inspection, let's check the nose, the engine cooling air inlets. We need to make sure those are free of obstructions. The propeller and spinner, check for nicks and security. We've got to check the air filter, just looking for restrictions by dust or any foreign matter that could be sucked in there. Got to check the nose wheel strut and tire, looking for proper inflation and the integrity of the strut. I'm going to check the static source opening. It's the left side of the fuselage. I'm going to verify the opening is clear. And this is also where you would plug in the GPU if you need to use it. Now we're going to check the fuel tank vent opening. Make sure it's not blocked. The stall warning opening. No blockage. Checking the landing and taxi lights. Want to make sure the cover is very clean. Left wing tie down. We're also going to check the fuel quantity on this side visually. Secure the fuel filler cap. And then we're going to do the quick drains again. We're going to come around to each sump and check them again. And with that complete, we'll check that last tire there. Inflation tread. And then we're going to go ahead and check our ailerons, freedom of movement, and it's secure. And we'll check the flaps, which we already did on this side when we had them set to 30 degrees. And after that, we can get back in the cockpit and begin starting the engine. So the before starting engine checklist, our pre-flight inspection is complete. You can do your passenger briefing. Next, you need to make sure the seats and seat belts are adjusted and locked. Brakes, we're going to test and then set them. Want to make sure all the circuit breakers are in. Electrical equipment off, and the avionics bus 1 and 2 are off. Now you always want to keep the bus 1 and 2 off during engine start because you can damage the avionics if you do keep them on. You want to make sure the fuel selector valve is both and the fuel shutoff valve is on, which is pushed in, and on this model it hangs out a little bit when it is in fully. Some Cessna 172s you'll see that it's all the way in, but on this one it does stick out a little bit, so just so you know, it is on. Alright, so now we're going to be starting the engine with the battery today. So we want to make sure the throttle is open 1/4 an inch. Mixture control is idle, cutoff, which is pulled all the way out. I'm going to come up to the standby battery switch. We want to test it. So first we're going to hold it for 20 seconds and verify that the green test lamp does not go off during that time. And then we want to arm it, and the primary flight display should come on from that. We should see the engine indicating system. We're going to check all those parameters, verify no red X's through the engine page indicators. Bus E volts check and verify it's 24 volts. That's the minimum. M-bus volts check, verify 1.5 volts or less is shown. Battery S amps, we want to verify the discharge shown is negative. Standby battery annunciator check and verify the annunciator is shown. Want to make sure that all people and equipment are at a safe distance from the propeller. Now we're going to give the aircraft some power. We're going to turn the alt and bat on, and the beacon light switch needs to be on. This lets people on the outside of the aircraft know that the aircraft is powered. Now, if the engine is warm, you can skip this and go straight to the start, but if it's the first flight of the day, we need to turn on the fuel pump, and then the mixture control we need to set to full rich, and you need to do this for about 3 to 5 seconds. I recommend about 3 seconds. That gives you some time in case you run into issues with pulling the mixture actually out. Sometimes it wants to go back in. So about 3 seconds, then get it to the idle cutoff position, and then turn the fuel pump off. And now the engine is primed. So now we want to turn the magneto switch to start and release it when the engine starts. So as it's starting, you're going to slowly advance the mixture to rich, and then the engine should start. So you can set the throttle to 1200 RPMs, and then you want to lean the mixture out until you have the maximum RPM that you can get. And then you set your throttle control to anywhere between 800 to 1000. And you'll do this until you take off. It's good for the spark plugs. It doesn't foul them up. Now, if you do flood the engine during the priming phase, you get too much fuel in there, you can place the mixture control in the idle cutoff position and then open the throttle control about half to full and then engage the starter motor. And when the engine starts, you can advance the mixture control to full rich and then position the throttle back to about 1000 RPMs. But that should clear it. All right, moving on, we got to check the oil pressure. We want to make sure the oil pressure increases into the green band, and the range is about 30 to 60 seconds on that. Got to make sure the MBAT and BAT-S, verify the charge shown is positive. The low volts annunciator, we want to verify that is not shown. You can turn on the nav lights, and the avionics bus 1 and 2 can come on. All right, so we need to start getting to know the G1000 panel. So these knobs at the top control the volume for your radios, and then you have a nav knob below here with 2 knobs on it. So one knob is going to control the first 3 digits, and the other knob controls the 2 numbers to the right of the decimal. And then there's a little arrow button right above that, and that lets you switch between frequencies. So you can have one programmed like your next one and get that ready to go. So then you have the heading bug. As you can see here, it spins right there in the center. And then these are some autopilot buttons. And as you notice, I'll cycle through each one, and you see it's listed at the top of the primary display what modes it's on. So you got to pay attention to that a lot. Sometimes you might think you're on a GPS, but you're really on roll. So stuff like that you gotta take notice of while you're flying this. But it has just about everything you could want on your autopilot there. Below this is the altitude knob. You can control it in 100s or 1000s based on the 2 knobs you have. And we'll go to the other side. You got the volume knob again, and then this is the same as that nav knob, except it controls the comms, changes them. Arrow does the same thing. You have a coarse and a baro button. This changes the barometric pressure. And then the coarse button, which works when you select CDI at the bottom of the G1000 panel here. Then you can change the course heading, and that's for VORs, approaches on the runways. Then you have the range knob. This is for the map. This works on the other side too, with the knob on the Bus 2 G1000, but this zooms in and out of the map. These are some more buttons for the flight management system, and then you have a knob. This also is for the flight management system. Works a little better on the other side, which we'll be getting into later for the flight planning. So we need to take a look at the bottom of our G1000 now, and this lets you change different map settings. You can have traffic, topography, terrain. Then we have some displays for the PFD. You can bring up different options to view the wind. For DMEs, letting you know which one you have selected. Altitude unit, that lets you select IN or HPA for the barometric pressure. Standard baro, you can set it to 299 or 2 easily if you need to. Then we have omni-bearing selector options. course, is for the 2 nav frequencies you got. And then the CDI, this lets you change between nav 1, 2, or GPS. XPDR, this is going to be your transponder. This is where you can turn it on standby, on, or alt. You can hit the VFR button, that'll squawk 1200 for you right away. Or you can hit code and put in your own squawk code. Next we have a refs page. So this will give you your best glide speed and all your V speeds. Then we have a list of the nearest airports that you can select and go direct to. Alerts, this will tell you anything that's wrong, like nav data being out of date. Moving on to the right side of the panel, these all function as they do on the left side. On the bottom of the G1000 panel, we have more information about your engine. You can look at the cylinders and look at all the different fuel information. Along with additional system information. And then we can do the same things we could with the tiny map on the left, but we can do it on the big map here. Can turn off airways. There's 3 different modes to that. And then here's the range knob, a little more effective on this side. Once you've accomplished these things, you can go ahead and disengage the parking brake and turn on your taxi lights and head on to the taxiways. Then to stay centered on those lines, you pretty much want to keep it centered with your G1000 panel, and that should keep that nose wheel going right down that line. Now to steer, you're going to be using your rudder and then the differential toe brakes. The rudder itself will give you about 10 degrees of turning, and then depending how much toe brake you apply, you can get it up to about 30 degrees of turning. So you're going to have to get used to using the differential brake and the rudder pedals in a combination on some of the sharp turns. So we're moving up to the hold short line, and we're going to do the before takeoff checklist. So we need to make sure the parking brake is set. The pilot and passenger seat backs are in the most upright position. Seats and seat belts, we're going to check that they're secured. The cabin doors are closed and locked. Flight controls are free and correct. Flight instruments on the PFD check no red X's. The altimeters are set. Our desired altitude is set. Our standby flight instruments checked. I forgot to match the pressure on my altimeter, but make sure you do that. And the fuel quantity. I want to verify one more time the level is correct. Now we can move the mixture control to rich. Verify the fuel selector valve is set to both. Autopilot, we want to engage it. Verify we can move the yoke. We're going to push the AP trim disconnect button and verify the autopilot disengaged. We're going to turn the flight director off, and then we can turn it back on. And then we want to verify the elevator trim is set for takeoff, and it probably won't be because we just did that autopilot test to make sure the trim disconnected it. So just make sure it's back up on that line. That's easy to forget. And now we need to do a mag check. So we're going to throttle up to 1800 on the RPMs. And we're going to go over to the Magneto switch, and we're going to check for an RPM drop. Now the RPM drop here should not exceed 150 RPMs on either the Magneto, the right or the left, and there shouldn't be a 50 RPM differential between the Magnetos. You want that all kind of even. So if you have that going on, you have a problem. But today they look good. I want to make sure the vacuum indicator is working. The engine indicators look good. And the ammeters and voltmeters are checked. Looking at the annunciators, we shouldn't have any at all. And now we can set the throttle back to 1000 RPMs or less. Want the throttle control friction lock and adjust if needed. Your comm frequencies and nav frequencies are set. And if you got a GPS flight plan, that is all good, which we'll be getting into next after this pattern work. Next, make sure that XPDR is set for VFR. You can either push the VFR button or you can program 1200 depending on what country you're in. If you're flying IFR, ATC will give you a code. You just use the code button. Now for a normal takeoff, 10 degrees of flaps is the preferred, but if you have a very long runway, you can take off just fine with the flaps up. You certainly want 10 degrees if you're taking off from a short or soft field. Now we're about to enter an active runway, so we want to make sure our strobe light is on and our landing lights before we enter. Entering the runway now, the normal takeoff checklist, we got the flaps up. Throttle control is going to be full. Mixture is rich, unless you're above 3,000 feet pressure altitude, and then you're going to lean to get the maximum RPMs. At around 55 knots, we're going to lift the nose wheel and try to climb out of here at about 70 to 80. Now the propeller on these 172s spins to the right. Because of that, it's going to want to pull the aircraft to the left. So you need some right rudder going down the field to correct that. If you have a crosswind going on, this can be even more exaggerated. So we have 55 knots, we're going to start to rotate. I got that just a little bit late talking and flying. And we're just going to try to pitch out of here for about 80. I like to get right on it with the trim so you're not using much elevator pressure. But this plane really wants to climb today in this situation, so we're going about 85 on our climb. And you know, to bring that down, just keep pitching up until you get the speed you want and then hold it there. So now let's talk about the pattern work we're going to be doing. In just a moment, we're going to be turning on the crosswind leg. Now this terminology comes from the wind. So when we're taking off, we're generally taking off into the wind. So when you turn on the crosswind, that wind is crossing, and then when you turn onto the downwind, which is parallel to the runway, you're now flying down with the wind. And then we'll be turning base and then final. And that's going to be how we fly the pattern. We're going to fly parallel to the runway at about 1,800 feet. And this pattern work will really polish you up in every single way. You get to practice your takeoffs, your landings, your go-arounds, trimming for altitude, managing your speed. It really lets you practice everything. So I'd recommend get up there, do 5-6 of these, you know, whenever you have a chance, and it'll really polish up your flying in this 172. You also need to know if the traffic pattern for the runway you're using is right or left, and it varies for each airport. You can find that information usually on airnav.com. They'll tell you each runway which direction the pattern is. Now for the pattern at sea level, we don't need to lean our mixture or anything, but normally when you're at cruise in this 172, you should be leaning the mixture out. But on this flight, we're only leans level for a very brief time. We're going to keep going down, climbing up, and everything, so it's fine to leave it rich. But if you are on a flight where you're at cruising altitude for a while, remember to lean that mixture for the performance that you want, good for fuel economy, and you don't want the throttle to be any more than 75% power. They recommend 2100 to 2700. I like the 22 to 2300 range for the RPMs in cruise. Now if you remember that traffic pattern graphic I showed a few moments ago, we're now turning onto the base leg of our approach, and it's going to bring us on to final. So as we descend, the power is set as desired, the mixture adjusted if needed. Altimeters are set on the PFD, and the standby altimeter is set. Now again, I totally forgot to set the standby altimeter in this flight, so make sure you do that. Don't make that mistake. For the flaps, there's several ways to tell the limitations. One is once you get the speed within that white arc on the speed tape, you can put out 10 degrees of flaps, but you don't want to do it past that. They also tell you this on the flaps lever. You have that separated by flaps 10 and then 20 and 30. So 20 and 30, you want to be below 85 knots, and flaps 10, you want to be below 110 knots. If we need to set a go-around altitude, we can do that now. The CDI soft key, make sure the nav source is the one we want. Right now, GPS. The fuel selector valve is still on both. Before landing checklist, the pilot and passenger seat backs are in the most upright position. Seat and seat belts secured and locked. Fuel selector valve both. Mixture control rich. Landing and taxi light switches are on. Autopilot is off, and the cabin power 12-volt switch is off. For a normal landing with flaps full, they call for an airspeed of 60 to 70 knots. Stall speed in this aircraft with the maximum weight, flaps up power idle is going to be 53 knots, and flaps full power idle is going to be 48. The glide ratio in this aircraft is 9:1, and that means for every 9,000 feet you travel forward, sacrificing 1,000 feet of altitude at the best glide. Coming over the threshold now, we're going to get real low. Going to start cutting the power. We're just going to hold it here, pulling up just gently. Touching on those mains first. Nose wheel down gently. We're going to adjust our trim, flaps up, and full on the throttle. And then rotating back out of here. And we're just going to do this over and over and over again, and it's going to make you a great Cessna 172 pilot. Coming in one final time at this Key West airport. Then we're moving into using the flight management system of the G1000 and also shooting ILS approaches and tracking VORs. Now once nose wheel is down, I don't really like to touch the brakes if you can, especially if you got plenty of runway. Just let it roll out. Speed will come off on its own. Very quickly, we're going to talk about these soft or rough fields. You're going to do these with 10 degrees of flaps. This is going to really help with the lift. And if you have an aft center of gravity, you're going to trim slightly nose down. And this is supposed to help with controlling it down the rough ground. So the short field takeoff checklist is as follows. Wing flaps 10 degrees. Brakes, we're going to apply them. Throttle control is full. Mixture is rich. Again, unless you're above 3,000 feet. With the power and mixture full, we're going to release the brakes. Looking for 55 knots and we'll rotate. And when you're safely past 60 knots, you can retract the flaps. Next, we're going to talk about flight planning, and I want to show you just a little bit of everything. So we have this plan from Modesto, California, going up to Sacramento, California, that we'll be putting in, and it's got things like a VOR and an airway and an ILS approach, so a little bit of everything. First, we'll start by clicking the flight plan button. Then we'll push the small FMS knob, and this is going to allow you to scroll through the plan page with the large FMS knob. Turning the small knob in this mode brings up the waypoint information page where you will type in your waypoints. And in this mode, the big FMS knob slides the cursor left and right, and the small FMS knob lets you change the characters. So right now we're typing in axing. Unfortunately, the little cursor goes away, the little turn cursor. So I'll try to point out which knobs I'm using. But yeah, it's going to be that small one to toggle through the letters, the big one to slide over to the next line to add the next character. So we have axing, and now we're hitting that enter key. And then we need to enter our next waypoint. So again, with the next line selected, we're going to move that small knob. And Linden is going to be the next waypoint we type out. And here's a page, it's just asking if it's a VOR of the US, Poland, Italy. It's obviously a US VOR. Now that we have our first leg, we have that next line selected below Lin. We're going to hit menu, and this gives you another page that lets you activate the flight leg, store it, or in this case an airway. So we need to go to Victor 23 over to, it's going to be to the SAC VOR. But it's nice how it gives you a choice of the nearby VORs and the nearby waypoints and the different transitions from that airway. So we have that entered now. Look, we have our first leg, the airway to the Sacramento VOR, and now we need to plan from the Sacramento VOR to McClellan, KMCC. So we're going to go down to that blank spot with the big cursor, and now again using that small cursor to select our next character. And we're just going to put in KMCC, and the rest of our plan will pretty much be the approach. So we're going to select KMCC, and we're going to hit Procedures this time. And the Procedures button is where you can load in your departures and arrivals, approaches, and we're going to select an approach. Again, we're going to do that with the Enter key. And we want the ILS 16 approach, which we just scrolled down to with the big knob. And we're coming from the SAC VOR, which technically we don't have to add because we already did in the previous segment, but we'll do it just to show the transition. You can also set your decision height of 200 feet here. We're scrolling with that small knob, and then you want to scroll down with the big knob to activate, and you can hit Enter. Now, if you want to add altitudes to each of your waypoints for the autopilot to follow, you can scroll over, again with the big knob, a little knob to change the number, which we're setting to 3,000 feet for each waypoint, and you got to hit Enter for each one to save it in there. Now, if you like this flight plan, you want to fly it again, you can actually go to the menu button, and you can store the flight plan for later use, which is pretty cool. Next, we're going to talk autopilot. We're currently on a climb out of Modesto, almost at 3,000 feet. I'm going to show you what the features on here do. So we just hit the FD button. That's going to turn our flight director on. And we're almost at 3,000 feet. I like to hand fly it up to altitude and then engage the altitude hold when I'm within about 100 feet of my cruising altitude. So we've hit the Alt button, and right now the autopilot is just following our altitude. It's not following a heading or the flight plan just yet. Next we'll use the heading mode. We just need to get our heading bug lined up with the heading we're currently flying. And that'll make sure the aircraft doesn't do any sudden turns. So we've activated the heading mode now. You can see that on our primary flight display, and it's now turning as we move the bug. So at the top of the primary display, it's telling us it's in heading mode, the autopilot is on, and it's maintaining 3,000 feet. To start using the GPS, we just need to hit the nav mode, and you'll see it changes on the primary flight display as GPS. You also need to make sure your CDI at the bottom of the primary flight display is set to GPS, so you should be seeing a pink line in that circle there. If it's green, that means you're on the VOR navigation. We've sped ahead a little bit here, and you can see it is lining itself up beautifully on our flight plan right now. This aircraft also has vertical speed mode. To demonstrate that, let's go up 1,000 feet to 4,000 and then hit the VS button. And once that's activated, you can just click nose up or nose down, and this will change your climb in increments of 100. So we're going nose up 500 right now. Remember to adjust your throttle for the climb. And yeah, that's going to put us into a climb into 4,000 feet where it will level off. Next, we're going to talk VOR navigation. So in that top left, we need to get our nav frequency set to the Sacramento VOR, which is 115.20, and then we need to transfer that over to the right. And you can see it lit up in green as SAC next to that frequency. And when we hit the CDI button to VOR 1, the frequency now turns green, and it's now tracking that VOR. So the last thing we need to do is go up to our course button. Just be careful you don't hit the borrow. And we need to move the course button until that green line is a perfect line. Right there. And now the autopilot is going to fly to the VOR off of that course heading. And again, this is identified at the top. It says VOR, AP, and 3000. Now, once you get really close to the VOR, you're going to obviously know you're crossing over it. As you cross over it, that green line is going to split really quick. And as you're approaching, you can still kind of line it up a little bit and keep it a solid line. But right as you're over the middle, it's going to slide over to the left or right. And then that arrow is going to flip, showing you that it's behind you. That's going to happen right now. Here we go. See, I'm trying to keep the line straight, but you just can't. You're crossing it, and that arrow just flipped. So it's letting us know it's behind us now. So we've made it to the VOR and we've circled it, but now we need to get back on to the rest of our flight plan. So we need to open the flight plan page. The waypoint after SAC is MCC, so we just need to hit the menu button and then activate that portion of the leg. And now it's going to fly the rest of that approach. It's right on the magenta line, so it just has to make a turn. You can see that it's doing so right here. And coming up next, we're going to add some fog and shoot the ILS approach for 1.6 at McClellan. So I've added some fog into the Sacramento area so we can shoot this ILS approach blindly most of the way down. It's still flying, it's sped up right now on GPS. It's making a turn and it's about to line us up with the runway. So you want to make sure first you're shooting an ILS approach on an ILS runway. And on the chart, it's going to give you the course heading for that runway and also the nav frequency that you need to program to do that approach. Right now, I'm turning the heading bug to line up with the heading we're flying right now. We're not using the heading mode, but just in case I need to, it's good to have that bug lined up with the direction you're currently going. Now the GPS is making its final turn to line up with the runway. It's going to meet the Bonds waypoint, which we need to be at 1,500 feet. That's the start of the glide slope. So now we're going to activate the vertical speed mode and go down to 1500. Now if the ILS approach is set up correctly, you'll notice the CDI is changing from GPS to Localizer 1 on its own, right when we're about 10 miles out. Once you're established, you want to hit the approach button, APR, right above the altitude knob there. And that is going to present this green diamond that you see moving down. Now that diamond is going to center itself on the middle line, and it's going to glide you down to the runway at this point. Now you can hear I'm adjusting the throttle to deal with the nose down of, it's doing it by 350 feet. And we just want to keep working on our speed. Getting it slowed down. We're entering the white arc now. So we're getting close to being able to use flaps. And you can shoot these approaches not being able to see the ground at all. It's a beautiful thing. But we're perfectly on the approach. Our course and glide are centered. Going through 75 knots, put out our first notch flaps. Pilot and passenger seat backs, most upright position, seats and seat belts secured and locked, fuel selector valve both, mixture control rich, landing and taxi light switches are on. The autopilot will be off momentarily when we get out of these clouds. Cabin power 12 volt switch is off. We're going to be doing a full flaps landing, so we need to keep the speed between 60 and 70 knots. Second notch of flaps is coming out. Maintaining 70 on the approach. And here we are, dumping out of the clouds. Got the approach lights and everything. So at any point, you can just turn off the autopilot and hand fly it the rest of the way. Let's go full flaps. Now if you see here, I'm letting my airspeed get a little bit below 60, and you want to try not to do that. We're very light, and the stall speed, we're still quite high above stall speed, but keeping it above 60 is really good. You just want that kind of, need a good buffer so you don't stall the aircraft. Over the threshold, let's get the plane down, fly it real low. And just keep flaring it out. Bleeding off all that speed. And there we go. That is the ILS Approach. I'm not using any brakes right now, just letting it lose its speed, rolling down the runway straight. Exited the runway, flaps can come up. And we can switch our landing light to taxi and turn off the strobe light. If you're using the pitot heat, you need to get that off now too. Next, we're going to get into the shutdown procedure, so stay tuned for that. Alright, so now we're going to secure the aircraft. We're going to start by setting the parking brake. Throttle control needs to be at idle. And then we need to get all of the electrical equipment off. Avionics bus 1 and 2 off. I'm going to get the panel lighting. Turn the nav light off, pitot heat, and the taxi light. Pitot heat can go off way earlier. In most situations you may not need it if there's no icing. I'm going to pull the mixture now. Magneto switch off. Master alt and bat off. Standby battery switch off. And we need to put the control lock back. And we're going to turn the fuel selector valve either to the left or right. This will prevent cross-feeding into the tanks. Well everyone, that's going to do it for this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. This is a great aircraft that's going to be used well into the future, from X-Plane 11 all the way into X-Plane 12. You take care everybody. See you next time.